Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show tonight, South Africans have to brace themselves for stage 8 load shedding and beyond. As things stand, Eskom is pleading poverty, and National Treasury says it has no money to give to the utility for it to buy diesel. ANC Women's League former President Batabile Wadlamini suffers a major setback. The ANC's elections committee says that she's not eligible for election as a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC come next week's conference.
It's quite sad that the justice system seems so inaccessible that a simple thing of just explaining how you arrived at this, maybe that will settle the matter, but they don't say it.
The Constitutional Court has dismissed former President Jacob Zuma's application to have prosecutor advocate Billy Downer removed from his arms deal corruption trial. We're speaking to legal analyst Mudidima Manya. All that coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. The Constitutional Court has dismissed former President Jacob Zuma's application to have prosecutor advocate Billy Downer removed from his arms deal corruption trial. In a unanimous decision, the court concluded that Zuma's application be dismissed as it bears no reasonable prospects of success. It appears that the delayed arms deal case may finally proceed, unless, of course, Zuma lodges another legal challenge. Joining us for some analysis is Advocate Mudidima Manya. Advocates, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. The question, I guess, people are asking today is, well, does it mean that finally the former president is going to face music, or does he have yet another opportunity still to challenge this ruling, as he has been doing with every other ruling?
Yes, good evening, Vuyo and your viewers. Maybe let me preface this by saying that it's important to constantly remind South Africans that we are a constitutional democracy, that we have an independent judiciary, that we have a human right that relates to access to justice. And often in our irritation, we tend to think that we should dictate to others on how they should exercise this right. But these rights are constitutionally entrenched. And I understand this idea that people may be irritated about former President Zuma in and out of court. But that is simply because our constitutional system permits that to happen. And may I add that it's not only Mr. Zuma who is in and out of court. I mean, the courts generally in the country are busy. And of course, Mr. Zuma might be attractive because he's a former president. So I think it's important to preface that. With regard to the outcome of the Constitutional Court judgment, of course, insofar as the issue relating to Mr. Downer is concluded. There's no other option, and I don't think that Mr. Zuma can go to court. Of course, now recently, you may have seen that there's a new approach of applying for rescission of the judgments of the highest court, which are supposed to be final and binding.
Now, but legally speaking, is there something he can still use? In other words, does he have the option? Whether, of course, he exercises it or not is a different matter. But does he have that option? Can he still appeal this one?
No, this one is concluded. Remember, just to give you a sequence, this matter started with a special plea in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg before Judge School, who ruled, and the issue was that Mr. Downer did not have the title to prosecute, and basically because he's biased. And Judge School ruled that Mr. Downer had title to prosecute. Mr. Zuma then appealed to the Supreme Court of Appeal, which dismissed his appeal, which means that they agreed with Judge Pool in Pietermaritzburg. He then petitioned the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, who agreed with the Supreme Court of Appeal. He then petitioned the Constitutional Court, which dismissed it, which basically means they agree with the Supreme Court of Appeal. So I don't see what other basis on this aspect would he want to appeal, and he doesn't actually have any opportunity as far as I'm concerned.
Perhaps, before we continue, let's pause for a second and just listen to what his spokesperson, Mzwanele Manyi, or how Mzwanele Manyi, his spokesperson, reacted to the news today.
One would have thought that at least the Constitutional Court would have had the courtesy to explain the reasons, because this thing has been long coming. It was the Constitutional Court itself that had said that His Excellency President Zuma can access the Constitutional Court directly. It's them that said this. So one would have thought that having approached them directly, following their own order, that they would at least, if they see the way they seem to have seen today, they would have at least give reasons. I mean, right now, I don't even know what's there to consider and what have you, because it's just a one and all of that. And that has been the gripe of His Excellency President Zuma, right from the Supreme Court of Appeal, to say, if you say you decline me this and this, give me reasons. But no one wants to give him reasons. But somehow we must all accept that justice has been served. How do you feel that justice has been served when you get turned down and it doesn't get explained to you why you've been turned down?
Any thoughts, Advocate, on what Mr. Manyi had to say there?
Look, I think the things that Mr. Manyi is saying are pretty disturbing for two reasons. Throughout, Mr. Zuma has got a legal team, and as far as I can remember, led by a senior advocate. And I think the advocate understands the procedures. But maybe for the benefit of the public, let me just respond to some of the issues. Mr. Manyi says that the Constitutional Court is the one that says Mr. Zuma can come to it directly. There is a provision in our Constitution for people to go to the Constitutional directly. We call it direct access. But you make an application. And in particular, if there are constitutional issues, the court is amenable to granting that direct access. Now, the procedure is that you start at the High Court, you go to the Supreme Court of Appeal, then you go to the Constitutional Court. This matter ran that process. So the Constitutional Court didn't have to say to anybody, you can come to us. It was automatic after the decision of the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal that the matter will go to the Constitutional Court. He also raises the question of the reasons. And Mr. Zuma's legal team knows that in matters of this nature, courts generally make orders. And if anybody wants reasons, you can actually apply for the reasons. You can request the reasons. And generally, the court, if necessary, will give you the reasons. So to create an impression that there's a miscarriage of justice here is a bit far-fetched and very disturbing. And I don't necessarily think it's based on ignorance, because there's a whole legal team that supports this decision.
Now, there's another issue as well, Advocate, because the former president is also, has made wanting to privately prosecute Downer, together with journalist Karen Moon. Now, one wonders now whether that is going to have any bearing on this case starting in earnest.
Not at all. This particular matter relates to a specific issue. And that specific issue is the title to prosecute of Advocate Bill Downer SC. That is what has been the issue. The issue around the criminal prosecution arises from the allegation that Mr. Downer and the journalist Karen Moon had disclosed the personal health information of former President Zuma. So it's a criminal trial unrelated to whether Mr. Downer has a title to prosecute or not.
Well, I felt this is particularly important because, especially on the back of what you said, Advocate, right at the beginning, when you gave us the context to this and the rights that Mr. Zuma has and the right he has to actually exercise those rights. Because in his application to the Concord, he did say that he was entitled to demand an acquittal, because the implication of the application, which is to that he was making, has a direct impact on his rights. Can you not then go and argue that, well, I've got this application that I have made to prosecute this guy privately, and that's part of me exercising my rights. Therefore, please wait until that a process is concluded?
You know, Mr. Zuma is entitled, like all of us, to demand to be acquitted, but is not entitled to be acquitted. You get acquitted when there's a trial, when the state fails to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. He will have to prove his case against Mr. Downer beyond any reasonable doubt, which is the standard in criminal procedure and law. Now, the relationship between the criminal prosecution and his corruption trial does not in real terms exist because they are not even heard before the same court by the same judge. It may as well be that because he's got to leave evidence first because he's now the prosecution. And it may be that at the end, at the close of his case, Mr. Downer and Karen Moon are discharged, which might be the end of the matter. It may as well be that Mr. Zuma, at the close of the state case in the corruption trial, is also discharged. So these are unrelated matters completely. But I think the question of whether he has now laid criminal charges is unrelated to whether Mr. Downer has a title to prosecute. But if the court were to find Mr. Downer guilty, that would constitute misconduct, and it would disqualify Advocate Downer from being a prosecutor in the matter of Mr. Zuma.
Hence, I'm asking this question because, I mean, in the event, I mean, that was to continue, then would it not, let's just say, I mean, that the case indeed does continue with Mr. Downer as the prosecutor. Then later on, another court, for whatever reason, finds that Mr. Zuma was actually right in his arguments. What becomes then of whatever outcome that may have been reached? Let's just say it goes against Mr. Zuma.
Well, remember, the procedure is that you can appeal any adverse judgment against you. So it doesn't take away Mr. Zuma's right in the event, but it's also dangerous to be preemptive and suggest that Mr. Downer can be found guilty.
Of course.
A trial is a bit of a complex matter. And you can look at a number of cases where the police and the prosecution will say we have a very tight case and I'm supposed to be the witness in that matter and the key witness for that matter, and I die. The state doesn't have a witness. It's not that the state didn't have a strong case. Now, there could be any other technicality which could impact on the case at any stage of the proceedings. So, it's very dangerous sometimes to say you think I'm going to win this case or I'm going to lose this case. Anything can happen during a trial.
Advocate Manya, let me thank you so much for your time and insights this evening.
Thank you.
Of course, on the back of that Constitutional Court ruling today, which dismissed former President Jacob Zuma's application to have prosecutor advocate Billy Downer removed from his arms deal corruption trial. As Advocate Manya was saying, it looks like the only thing that's going to happen next now is for that particular case to continue. Well, Zuma's staunch ally, meanwhile, and that's former ANC Women's League President Bathabile Dlamini, has suffered a major setback. The ANC's elections committee has ruled out has ruled her candidacy for the ANC out, which means that she will not be eligible for election the ANC, for election to the National Executive Committee, I should say, of the ANC, even though she has been nominated and she actually did contain big numbers. The committee, that's the committee, the elections committee of the ANC, says that the vetting process as conducted by the agency of the electoral committee, known as the elections, has revealed information which negatively affects your ability, that's Bathabile Dlamini, this is a letter to her, to stand for nomination as a candidate for all NEC positions during the 55th National Conference. The vetting information at our disposal reveals that you have a historical record of being found guilty of a serious crime in a court of law for which the prison sentence had been more than 6 months. To be specific, you are summarily disqualified as a candidate for all NEC positions, including additional members during the 55th National Conference, as per, and then they state the rules. Of course, she is unhappy with this decision and has taken to Twitter. And among the things that she says there is that the battle has, she says, Nazoke, the fight is on you. In this list, the fight is on. You are in the list second time, and you are told stories after the process is complete. Mzwandile Mbeje is our political editor, and he now joins us on the line to look at this. Mr. Mbeje, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. I don't know what you make of both what the elections committee has had to say to her and, of course, her subsequent response.
Yes, a very good evening to you, Vuyo, and the viewers. And I guess it's something that was expected, given that we know that she went through court proceedings and then she was found guilty. And of course, she was given the option of a fine. But I think that doesn't take away from the fact that she was found guilty, I think, on the case relating to perjury. So, and I'm actually expecting, Vuyo, a lot more in terms of the list of the people who may have been nominated, but then who will go through the similar route. In fact, my information tells me that I think someone like Bongane Bongo may have received a similar kind of notice as well in relation to this. So I guess when the electoral committee then releases the names, we'll actually know a lot more when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, one would imagine people like Andile Lungisa as well, because already, I mean, you know, the appeals committee of the disciplinary committee of the ANC has actually upheld a decision that was reached previously, and he aspires, of course, to be the Treasurer General of the ANC. Now, interesting that Bathabile Dlamini, in her a tweet, says that she has been nominated second time around, and only now, when her name has come up again, is she being told that she doesn't qualify. But the elections committee actually quotes ANC rules to say you are, and they are referring to that rule, but hers or her response doesn't refer to any ANC rule or the ANC's constitution, which I find rather telling.
Well, Vuyo, you are aware that there's still a huge fight, particularly on the step-aside rule. And I think those who are opposed to it have vowed to take it to the conference and actually have it scrapped. And I think many of the people, including someone like Bathabile Dlamini, are hoping that those opposed to the step-aside rule may then prevail and perhaps be able to, let's say, force the conference, or the conference be able to take a decision that upon its scrapping, if let's say that's the direction it's taking, and then whoever then had been charged may qualify. So if then you are not even on the ballot paper, even if it's scrapped, so the chances of you may be very slim, because remember, we're talking about an 80-member national executive team, actually 86 if I count the top 6 as well. So there's a lot of names to choose from. So we will not just forget, remember one name if it was not on the ballot, or if it was not on the list. So you better do it now so that everyone knows you are fighting this. So it's a huge fight, and as much as it's currently the rule that is being observed, we know it's being opposed by provinces, for example, like KZN, provinces like Limpopo, and those are big provinces. KZN being the biggest, and Limpopo being the third biggest, and it's third biggest. I mean, it's just a few votes behind Eastern Cape. So those are really heavy voices, and if they are able to lobby their counterparts elsewhere, and then this is taken to the vote, and then it succeeds, so it may mean something else for you.
Of course, I mean, for the sake of our viewers, I just need us to clarify 1 or 2 points, just on the back of what you've just said. If the rules as they stand say or disqualify her, right? And then let's say they indeed go to conference next week, and then whatever process is followed there, this issue gets debated, and it gets decided that we're throwing this thing away. Would it not mean then that whoever may have been disqualified on the basis of that rule, right, can then be reinstated, so to speak, back onto the list? In other words, why is it necessary for her to, or anybody for that matter, to fight now for their name to remain on the list before the conference that may or may not nullify this step-aside rule? Why is it so crucial for that to happen now? Yeah. Can it not apply retrospectively? I guess is a different way of asking it.
Yeah. You know, I think what people and even branches and even leaders of the ANC are hoping is that the conference, which you and I know is the highest decision-making body, so it can, whatever decision it decides to take, it can decide to say, well, we're scrapping this, so whoever had been barred qualifies immediately. Or they can say, we're scrapping this, but it will only be in effect at the next conference, for example, or at a particular time. So they are relying on the fact that the conference is the highest decision-making body. So in its wisdom, it can decide either way. So you better be on the safe side. You better be known that you are around. Everyone must know that as that cause is being fought, so your name is there. So that basically remains with the branches. I mean, they normally say in the Nguni language, amandla asemasebeni, so which basically means the power lies with the branches. Whatever the branches decide must happen, because that is the highest decision-making body, the conference. I mean, we normally refer to the NEC as the highest decision-making body in between conferences. So
yeah.
you then pin your hopes on this body to effect whatever decision.
Okay, let's just say then that's what she's hoping for, but for now, she wants to stay on the safe side, right? Increase her chances or
Yes.
keep her chances of being elected into the National Executive Committee alive.
Yeah.
Between now and Friday, what can she still do on the back of what the elections, Kgalema Motlande's elections committee has said? Realistically.
Quite honestly, yeah. Quite honestly, at this stage, there is nothing other than taking this whole process to court, which I don't know if it will succeed. But between now, I think we are left with about 9 days. There isn't much you can do. Of course, the NEC will be meeting tomorrow. But in terms of really changing the position that she wishes to, it's very difficult at this stage. That's why I'm saying, unless somehow someone decides to challenge this in court, and then the court accepts that it's on an urgent basis, it hears it, and then rules in that way. But the conditions for urgency are quite complex. So the judges do ask you very tough questions to say, why did you leave it so late? Because you've always known about the conference that's coming. So that's my guess, if let's say you want to take it all the way. But the best bet now is to probably have lobbied properly within the branches, and then at the conference, when it happens, the branches overturn it, and then you can qualify. That is the best you can do. If you haven't lobbied enough, Vuyo, I'm sorry, it's done.
Quick one before I let you go. That meeting, Oscar Mabuyana, the chairperson of the Eastern Cape, told you guys is going to or may happen tomorrow. Is that meeting of chairpersons indeed going ahead?
Well, from our understanding and from the confirmation of the chairperson of the Eastern Cape, who also happens to be the nominee for deputy president, obviously, along Paul Mashatile and Ronald Lamola, that meeting will happen. Because I think what they're concerned about, Vuyo, is that given that the ANC is going through so many challenges, and then despite those challenges, you are now going to a conference where you are also even more divided because you are not agreeing on the leadership. So they are hoping they will find each other somehow to see if they can't agree on leadership. It may not necessarily be all the names in the top 6, but perhaps if they can find a way, let's say around the president or even the deputy president, and I guess that will lessen the tensions and perhaps take a bit of pressure in terms of entrenching the divisions that we've been witnessing in the ANC. In fact, Vuyo, one of the biggest illustrations that will point whether the ANC is really united or divided is Tuesday, when that vote takes place in Parliament after the debate on the Phala report. It will be interesting to see if there will be members of the ANC who will openly break ranks and vote against what the party has instructed. So they are facing a very difficult times, given that they're having all those issues. So they are trying to say, as leaders from across the provinces, perhaps there's some last-minute ditch we can do to try and perhaps preserve at least a semblance of unity.
Well, I mean, what the chairpersons may do tomorrow, I'm probably being facetious even here. Where does that fit in? Or I mean, what does that mean if they want to, arrive at consensus candidates, or a situation where there may not have to be a context? If, as you were saying earlier, CT, Amandla Semasebeni.
I think as much as they say Amandla Semasebeni, which means the powers, the branches possesses all the powers, but then they leave a room of saying, but we accept to lobby and be lobbied. So, which means even if your branch has taken a decision, it's still allowed that you can meet with other people. I think what the provinces are basically doing is to try and exploit that aspect to say, yes, we accept what the branches have done, but as the leaders as well, so we have a responsibility to make sure that we maintain the unity. So my view and my suspicion is that perhaps they will try to get, let's say, the position of the president not contested, and then they then may agree on what happens to the deputy presidency, and perhaps they can even go down. But I think the most contentious positions currently, I know that the SG is the very important position, but it doesn't seem to be evoking those kinds of divisions. So it will be that of the president and the deputy president. So we know the front runners there. Of course, it's not done until it's done.
Let's leave it there. Mzwandile Mbete, that's our political editor, of course, on the back of that decision by the ANC's elections committee to actually tell Batabile Dlamini that she actually doesn't qualify for a position in the National Executive Committee of the ANC come the conference that starts on Friday next week. The impact, of course, of this ANC election fever is being felt even in government. The Eastern Cape Provincial adjustment budget could not be approved today as MPLs were allegedly out campaigning for next week's National Elective Conference. We're going to explore that issue a little later on, but we're also going to explore next South Africa's energy woes going from bad to worse. Are there solutions to our energy crisis? We hear that stage 8 and beyond are a very real possibility now, given what Treasury has actually told Eskom that it doesn't have money to give the utility for it to buy more diesel so that it can keep the lights on. All those issues we're exploring next after this short ad break. Eskom has come under pressure from various quarters to restore electricity supplies and keep the lights on. As the rolling blackouts hit stage 6, the power utility has been accused by a Mineral Resources and Energy Minister of agitating to overthrow the state. And Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan today said he directed Eskom management and the board to urgently stabilize power supply.
The country is once again plunged into hours of blackouts with devastating impact on the already fragile economy. Eskom blames its inability to keep the lights on breakdowns of generating units at various of its power stations. The troubled power utility has postponed plant maintenance for Kubek Unit 1 due to the current pressure on the grid. The Department of Public Enterprises has apologized to the nation for the impact and disruptions caused by the power blackouts. Minister Pravin Gordhan says he has directed Eskom board and management to act with a great sense of urgency to stabilize electricity supply. He says the frequency of breakdowns is attributed to some element of malfunctioning within the Eskom systems and possibly sabotage. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ongoing power cuts are a concern.
We're going through stage 6 load shedding, and this is continues to be a concern, but I'm sure is being addressed by the various people who are mandated to do so, and we will continue focusing on what is best for South Africans.
Energy expert Ted Blom likens Eskom to a sinking ship, saying things are not running properly, leading to further loss of skills at the power utility.
If you don't do the proper maintenance, and what Rolani also said is there was no budget made available on time to do the maintenance. There was no spare parts. There's a skill shortage. The management of the outages is not competently done, etc., etc., etc. If you add all that together, Mr. Matabere's 9 points, all you can conclude is that Eskom is a walking disaster.
Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank says the intense load shedding adds to the pressures that businesses already face, especially small and medium enterprises.
A key concern is the strain that load shedding puts on already weak economic growth and the viability of corporates, in particular SMEs. Corporate liquidations continue to increase, by 11.8% in the year to September 22. Combined with higher interest rates and debt servicing costs, this affects their ability to service debt.
Meanwhile, Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy earlier announced that an additional 13 projects under the 5th bid window for the Renewable Energy IPP procurement program have signed legal agreements paving the way for additional new generation capacity to come online from early 2025. Doria Sefakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Joining us now to weigh in on the country's energy crisis is Jose Muleshe, an energy expert, and Dumelo Khopane, who is an executive manager at IX Engineers. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Huyo.
I don't know, Dumelo, if, today's utterances from, stuff we didn't include, the Minister of Health, speaking elsewhere, was talking about how hospitals who had been exempted, who rely solely on Eskom for power supply and have no money to actually buy their own, to do their own thing, are also going to be seriously disadvantaged. And the interesting thing for me was how members of the executive speaking, to the public don't seem to have or to give us the hope that somewhere at executive level or somewhere where it matters, someone is working around the clock doing the best that they can to actually deal with this crisis. Minister of Public Enterprises says, I've asked Eskom to do something, but he doesn't seem to know what it is that they can do or to believe that they can even do something. I don't know. There's just a sense of hopelessness.
Yeah, good evening to you, Vuyo, and your studio crew, my fellow guests, as well as your viewers at home. Yeah, no, look, if you start with hospitals, which is what you started with, firstly, spatial planning for any township development. And I know in South Africa, township means the old, but township development is from a planning point of view, town planning point of view, which includes even in the suburbs. So for any township development or planning, you do not, it's virtually impossible to design any town and start categorizing where to place, because you need hospitals within certain radiuses, serving a certain number of people. You need schools within certain radiuses, serving a certain number of people. So you cannot go put schools at the end of a town and hospitals, because that's not how you plan a town. So to exempt hospitals is going to be very tricky for any municipality or for Eskom for that matter. Then coming to the other issue is the sense of hopelessness. I think in every dire situation, you need men and women to come up with solutions. There's to calm down, get out of the noise and come up with solutions. And I think that's where, engineering companies that are there. I know there's talk of skills shortage. I'm not sure if some of us agree entirely with that. There might be some niche skills like nuclear and so on that, perhaps we might need to import. But I think the generic skills of repairing motors and transformers and stringing overhead lines and switchgear, there's more than enough of those skills, I think, in the country.
But if they are there, why are they being utilized? Why aren't they being sourced?
Well, I'm not sure what is the reason, but I think perhaps the the built environment in the country, perhaps we are not playing our role. And maybe it's about time we start imposing ourselves in the boardrooms where some of these discussions are happening. Institutions like the CIDB, institutions like Consulting Engineers of South Africa and its fellow sister entities that are all under the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, most of them. There are some few that are not there, like the scientists who do the environmental studies and so on, that are placed under other ministries. But I think everyone in the built environment, through their relevant statutory as well as voluntary bodies, should now either be invited to the table or start requesting or insisting on a seat on the table. Because I think this situation is really impacting the country badly, especially the SMMEs, as we saw in the clip there. You know, there are some businesses like hair salons, GPs, dentists, and you know those small businesses
running every day.
Yes.
The small guy
Yes.
who's creating jobs for
Yes.
a few people in a country like ours. That, I mean, we're seeing record high unemployment. Levels right now. These are the people who can't work because they also can't afford,
Yes.
to.
Yeah, because the business model is not to buy diesel. It just doesn't make business sense if you're going to factor in the purchase of diesel for a GP's practice, for a salon, for a
40 rands haircut.
Yes, you know, it's the business model doesn't support generators. The capex maybe they might save enough to raise the capex, but definitely when it comes to the opex, it's going to be, the business model doesn't support that. So we need to resolve the situation.
Jose, are we to assume here, given everything we've been told by various players today, that if indeed Eskom doesn't have the money to buy diesel and Treasury, cannot give them the money to buy diesel, then the situation, we're doomed, basically?
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to everyone. The situation is bad. To get to stage 6 load shedding, I know that we've been there before, so we take it as something that has happened before, but it's not a good situation to face. And we've mentioned before, I think I mentioned here on the show, that to rely on diesel is not the best solution. The best solution would have been to look at new options and to look at the existing coal-fired fleet to try and address the issues there. But we're here now. I don't know whether there's, as the Minister of Finance has indicated, that you don't just get money lying around somewhere. There's a process to getting the finances to be able to source the diesel. But it is important, it's critical, because we have almost 50% of Eskom installed capacity that is off. And part of it is, most of it is unplanned outages. And that's a huge number of outages that are not there. So we do need to find a solution somehow.
I was listening to someone saying, I think one of our shows, earlier today, that what we've seen, Jose, over the past year, is actually worse than what we've seen over the past 8 years cumulatively. That's scary.
It is scary, and one thing that utilities are known for is the ability to forecast what will happen. Not only do they forecast on an hour by hour, they even minute by minute, if you understand their systems. In this case, it does not look like forecasting is even sometimes accurate, in the sense that in a day we'll say we'll be in stage 6, then shortly after that you're told no, it's going to stage 5. There's that uncertainty. Generally, other countries have faced these challenges, but you would forecast in a way that makes more sense. That gives an indication that there's relatively little control over what is going on, and that is very scary.
What is the sense, though, Dumela, out there about the things like what Jose is mentioning now, that the ability to know with certainty what will happen over the next 24 hours, over the next week, and that kind of thing. What are the conversations among you as professionals, the built environment people, and so on, as to why it is that Eskom can't get it right, even at that level?
Yeah, we all are frustrated about it because we know that there is SCADA. We know that these generators, they are monitored everywhere. These things don't just break. They heat up, they make noises, vibration analysis. So because we don't get the details of the breakdowns. So for me, and I think people in the built environment, perhaps it's about time that we request Eskom management to start having monthly, or maybe even now that we're in stage 6, weekly updates where, they actually explain which units broke down, and we need to understand what root cause failure analysis was done, what were the findings, and how they are going to go about repairing that, so that we really start, because we sit here with a little bit of speculation, which is also not fair on them, but that's also because, we're not getting the information. So perhaps that's where we need to start. We need to start having the CEO of Eskom and his management team giving the country an update.
Well, they do that to journalists, and one wonders whether, in fact, then those briefings go far enough, or perhaps the kinds of questions that engineers and other people would ask, journalists are able to do so. And I'm saying this as a journalist myself, but also acknowledging the fact that, over the years, because of economic and other factors, newsrooms have become smaller. You no longer have specialization. Typically in the past, you would have people who really have an intense knowledge of the industry as, journalists. Yeah, but something you have much less of, these days. But who say, going forward, what can give the South African, consumer of electricity reprieve of any kind? What do people do now? If things do indeed get to stage 8 and beyond.
The thing as consumers that we have control over is reducing our loads, reducing our consumption, and looking at alternatives, those who can afford, looking at alternatives to self-generate. Those are some of the things that we can do, reduce demand and look at alternative for self-generation, because the situation really, we can't really forecast what is going on, what is going to happen in the near future, but we know that it's definitely, there are no solutions related to new capacity that's going to come in pretty soon. So any solutions that are there are really just tinkering here and there with what is in the system. But the new capacity that will come in will probably come in 2025 or something like that. And that even is not significant capacity that we're currently busy with.
The idea you're talking about of how perhaps professionals, whether it's the built environment, engineers and so on, can perhaps get involved, even from the level of being able to interrogate those regular reports that currently the Eskom management gives, all the way to actually putting your shoulder to the wheel. Are there conversations actually taking place where people like you are saying, perhaps this is how we can do it, or maybe we should approach so-and-so and say, how about? Is any of that happening?
Yeah, I think it could be better coordinated. And as you said earlier, that probably, yes, there are updates to the media, which is a bit of a different thing because you give a bit of a high level. Now we need to get into the nuts and bolts, and that requires a separate forum. Doesn't mean it should be closed to the media for those who are interested. So surely those discussions are happening, but I'm not sure if they're happening I think they could be coordinated better through the built environment, statutory bodies as well as the voluntary bodies. The other thing I think for us is perhaps we also need a bit more long-term certainty in terms of our energy policy, the RP in the country. That would then help Eskom, together with the support of the private sector, to then be able to plan, because these projects are not, it takes a few years to plan them and get their approvals. Firstly, it takes a few years to put money together for them, to get the authorizations, and then to build them. So we need a bit more certainty in that. And then, of course, I think the big issue is repairs and maintenance. Unfortunately, we cannot wish the coal fleet away. It's going to be with us for a while. Therefore, it has to be repaired and maintained. So that's something that I think people in the built environment who are not Eskom employees would be able to make inputs, if requested, to say, if we had these forums, to say, let's understand what is the repair and maintenance. Some of us actually always, get chastised by, our colleagues in the built environment when everyone says we've got aging infrastructure in the country. And I say, but, most of our cities are younger than the oldest cities of the world that are still functional. So in my view, we have under-maintained infrastructure. And it's all over. It's not just power, it's the roads, it's waters and sanitation, all the key infrastructure is landfill sites. So I think we really need to look at the maintenance regime of Eskom and start interrogating that. And maybe Eskom can put it more out there so that when we make comments like this, they're a little bit more informed, because currently they are based on speculation.
In the few seconds we have left, Jose, unless the things Tumelo says need to happen. But from where you sit, if I heard you correctly previously, we're looking at a reprieve in about 2 years at the earliest.
Depending on what we do, even that, I'm not saying that with certainty, as it's mentioned there in studio, that without having that plan that says this is what is going to happen and when, we all really speculating. Regarding the issue of the skills, for me, Rulani was very, very clear about some of the things that are happening. Those are skills that have left Eskom. The question is why. So you can have the skills, bring them in. Do you have a conducive environment that allows the people who have the skill to be able to do what they need to do is the question.
Let me thank both of you for coming through and helping us understand these issues better. Jose Molesha, an energy expert, and Tumelo Khopane, who is an executive manager at IX Engineers. To this now, the impact of the ANC's politics and internal election fever ahead of next week's elective conference is being felt far and wide. The Eastern Cape Provincial legislature today could not approve the adjustment budget because many ANC MPLs were not in the House, so the budget could not be approved. Allegedly, it's because they were out there campaigning for next week's elective conference. The leader of the Democratic Alliance in the province, and that is Ngaba Panga, joins us on the line. He was at that session. Mr. Panga, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. What happened today? I thought, the debates happened, everyone spoke, and when it came to the time to approve, the ANC didn't have the requisite numbers. Okay, Mr. Panga is frozen there. I don't know what is happening. He is, of course, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. We were trying to get a sense of what actually happened there, because it would be, frankly, wrong for a government work to take a backseat if indeed the allegations are true. It doesn't look like we're having. Well, we're going to leave it there. That's our show for this evening. Thank you very much for watching. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.